third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen. Izzo's dying for a moving screen.
It's that dreaded moving screen.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart of Hoops. It is Thursday, March 25th, about, 3 days from Michigan's Sweet 16 matchup with Florida State. Got a little preview for the people. Dylan, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well. Hanging in there,
okay.
trying to get through this week, getting by. How about you?
Oh, man, I'm great. Just terrific. Right now on The Athletic, you can subscribe for $1. So check out all of our March coverage. Check out all the work that I'm doing. Got a feature, like magazine type piece coming this week, hopefully by tomorrow if I can get this thing done. Dylan, what's cooking over at Hoops?
So this week we had a really good, Teo wrote a really good feature on Eli Brooks.
It was good.
I can say it's good because I didn't write it. So I don't feel bad saying that. It was actually really good. You should check that out. I think it's worth it. Also have a first look up on Florida State. We will have some film breakdowns this week, some matchup breakdowns, basically everything you'd want to see on Florida State. We'll have it this week, but I would start with that Eli piece and then go from there.
I'm moving on you.
I see that. You're stressing me out a little bit here.
I'm trying to get some coffee while recording. So, Dylan, I think everyone is just kind of setting this game up as saying it's a redo of LSU. Talk me into thinking a little bit differently, maybe a little bit more nuanced on that.
Yeah, I don't think that's really the case. That's kind of like saying, okay, you played a Princeton team in the first round. Now you're playing a Beeline team. It's the same thing. It's exactly. Like, it's not exactly the same. There are some similarities. Oh my goodness.
Sorry, folks.
There are some similarities as far as certain parts of the game plan, but I think it's a big step up, and there are pretty key differences between how these teams play. It's still like you're on the right track as far as, you're going to have to play transition defense. A lot of the things we talked about in last week's pod still applied, but Florida State is a much better team. They do things differently, and they actually play defense, which makes them a completely different team from LSU.
Yeah, I'd say if you just kind of like overlay the rosters, right, that's you see these similarities, right? Both of these teams, it's kind of everyone's over 6'4". They've got athletes. FSU is actually a little bit bigger than LSU. Actually have a true 7 foot at center. Number one ranked team in terms of height in the country. They average 6'8".
Bigger than everyone.
Yeah, they're just monsters, right? So, how do you want to go through this matchup, man? Do you want to start with Michigan offensively or defensively?
Let's start with,
or do you just want to get right into the narrative elements?
No, I'm trying to decide if we should start by kind of looking at big picture,
sure,
what they do. But I think we should probably just start with Florida State on offense and just kind of their identity, right? So it's interesting because LSU, we were talking about shot makers, right? They just have guys who can get buckets in isolation. Florida State is very versatile, and they have a lot of different guys. Scotty Barnes is basically their point guard. He actually comes off the bench, but he's 6'9", right? So they have a lot of length, and they will attack you at different positions than maybe you're used to. For Michigan, Barnes is actually a pretty natural matchup with Franz Wagner, but for most teams, that's completely foreign to see a 6'9" point guard. Raquan Gray is their power forward. He's 6'8", 260. He'll initiate ball screens. Like you don't see that.
Him.
You don't see that normally in college basketball by any stretch. What's interesting though is that it's very much a kind of like they play off the pass. Like LSU played off of the shot. They were shot creators. They shot for themselves. Most of Florida State's wings and whatever you want to call them, people playing with the ball, they're looking to pass. They're all better if they can pass to someone else who then shoots or drives or whatever else. So they want to draw to and they want to make the pass where then they attack. In a lot of ways, that's similar to what made Michigan really good this year, right? Where they have guys with the ball who can draw attention, but really they kill you when they draw your entire defense in and they either throw a lob up to Balsa or they throw a kick out pass for an open three, or they just have someone else that gets downhill and scores over you. The good thing for Michigan is Michigan's defense is designed to take those passes away, right? That's what they've done all year, is funnel teams in to tough mid-range twos and say, okay, take your best shot creator and try to get a shot. Florida State doesn't really have that guy. They don't have a Cam Thomas who's just going to say, okay, you and me, I'm going to get an 18-foot bucket. And so Michigan's defense sets up kind of nicely in that regard, despite the fact that individual matchup-wise, there are some huge size disadvantages and everything else.
Yeah, that was great. The way that the kind of the unselfishness, the way that Florida State plays, man, it is phenomenal. They all pass the ball, right? Everyone's comfortable with the fact that 9 guys play over 14 minutes a game, basically. There's a level of buy-in in that program that is pretty wild, man. Leonard Hamilton is just one hell of a coach, and his kind of philosophy, and all these guys who are interchangeable and all this length and size and blah blah blah, and everyone can pass and play. He's been doing this shit since way back, right? I mean, he really was ahead of the curve on all this stuff. So I was not that familiar with Raekwon Gray until starting to look into this game. I love this guy. I mean, he's just huge. He's 6'8", 260, thick as hell. And he does so many different things, man. I mean, he can, the fact that he can get the ball at the top of the key, go downhill, right, and score the ball. He can pass it. He can finish around the rim.
Offensive class.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a really unique player. Am I right in thinking this is going to be a massive test for all of the love that young Brandon Johns has been getting this week?
Yeah, So I went back and watched some film of Brandon. I'm working on my matchup breakdown of this game right now. And honestly, I think it kind of sets up as a nice matchup for him. I think Johns' biggest problems defensively this year have been off the ball and sort of kind of sticking mental mistakes off the ball, losing shooters, things of that nature. Just a guy who's going to try to drive right at his chest. I think that's where Johns has done really well over the last couple of weeks. I clipped 5 or 6 plays where anyone from Cam Thomas to EJ Liddell, he's closed out one-on-one isolation, walled up, and contested a shot and forced a miss at the rim. That's probably been the best part of his game over this week. And that's Gray's going to do that. And Gray's not going to shoot. So it's a scoutable prep, right? So if he's going to make 3 threes, you're going to let him. He shoots 27% from 3 in the year. So if you're just telling Brandon, okay, this guy's going to just try to bully you to the rim, I mean, there are worse players to have in your that's a fine matchup for Brandon Johns, I think. It's tough. It's tough.
It's a good matchup, but Gray's really good. He's really good.
I think it's better than a guy, if it was Michigan playing a 4-out team who had a guy who's going to get up 8 threes in a game, that would be more concerning from Michigan's point of view, I think.
I agree.
It's crazy that we're saying there's a plus matchup for Brandon Johns defensively after how he played at times this year, but that's really a testament to how well he's played over this last few weeks, and I'm really interested to see it.
And I said, I framed it that way in part because, look, we've seen some good things from Brandon Johns here of late, right? But consistency has been the talking point throughout his time at Michigan, right? I mean, go back to the Rutgers game last year when everyone thought, okay, here's the breakout. This guy's going to end up being a lottery pick by the end of this year. And then he just disappeared, a week later. So that's the thing, right? Can you do it game over game? Can you string some really great performances together in Liver's absence? It's a big, big spot for Brandon Johns to answer the bell again. And he did it against LSU. And this is going to be another one. So
Yeah, and it's funny because we always talked about Isaiah Livers being a mismatch against teams that go big, but he also let Michigan match up with teams that went small, right? He could guard on the perimeter. Michigan, this is going to be really the third team in a row in the postseason that Michigan's playing that isn't really going to put a stretch guy out there that's really going to test Brandon Johns, right? It's not really like, oh, Michigan should be going with 4 guards. I think it's another game where you need Johns to play how Johns plays because he fits the game, right? This is going to be a street fight around the basket, and those are the games where you want his length, his rim protection, everything else that he brings to the table.
So that's kind of the natural matchup, especially when Florida State has the big boy in, right? Balza?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if they go a little small, right? If they go small, how much do you, let's put it this way, how much do you think Florida State's going to play kind of that lineup, but with Balza be, go big, have him, kind of bodying up against Dickinson versus maybe going a little bit smaller and trying to create mismatches the other way?
I think what we've seen, if you look at Florida State's game logs, Balsa's been playing 25 minutes whenever he can. I think he played like 6 minutes against Notre Dame. But again, Notre Dame's very much a perimeter-oriented team. I would imagine that Balsa's going to play 25 minutes if Hunter Dickinson's in the game, right? I would put that pretty confidently as they're not just going to go away from that. It's a pretty big part of who they are, and he brings them a lot of good things, especially offensively, defensively. Like, it's a big part of their identity. So I don't see this as like, oh, we're going to play him 6 minutes and then go small, because that's kind of what would have happened. Whatever when these teams play back in LA, that was when Michigan was more perimeter oriented, and they would have kind of a token starting big guy. But I don't think Balsa's like going to be a 6 minute guy here. He's going to play 25, 26 minutes and be a big part of the game.
I guess I asked that in part because of what we just saw against LSU, right? And in terms of what LSU was able to do in defending Michigan in the ball screen with Mike Smith. So, you could watch that tape and make a case just given the personnel that Florida State has, and I don't know that much about balls in defending, 1-5 ball screen, but you can probably fill in the folks on that. But I would think, having kind of their length and stuff like that if Mike Smith's in and Michigan's trying to run 1-5 ball screens, you can replicate what LSU did with the personnel and kind of attack those ball screens as much as anything. And so much of what Florida State does is about eliminating other teams' vision, and it's the way that they swarm the ball for 94 feet. It's the way that they double in the post. It's the way that they defend the ball screens. They don't let you see the court. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think what you said at the end is sort of the entire point. Whatever they do, whether they're guarding ball screens, whether they're guarding in the post, it's all about applying pressure and really heating up the ball and making you uncomfortable and making it hard to make decisions. I think that they're probably going to be just as worried about Hunter Dickinson in the post as they are about stopping Mike Smith ball screens, and I think that keeps Balsa on the floor. I think they can do so many other things. There's so many ways they can defend ball screens with their length that I don't think you might even need to switch that, right? Like maybe you just ice every Mike Smith ball screen and force them down the baseline. There's so many things that you can do there. I don't think that's it's not like Michigan last year with Xavier Simpson, where if you take the ball screen offense away, you take the whole team away. I think Michigan has proven, and the big part of that last game was they're just going to play through the post in that regard. So for me, I think what's interesting is they'll play Balsa, but they're still going to swarm the post. They're still going to double. They're going to trap. It's going to come from every different direction. And that means there's opportunities to pass out, but it means it's going to put a ton of pressure on Hunter Dickinson to be composed, make the right pass, and be like they're long enough on every other spot on the court that the right pass, you can make the right read and it's still a turnover, right? They're going to make plays like that just because of their length, right? We've seen that with Franz Wagner a lot. Teams might make the right read, but he's just long enough defensively that it's a deflection and a run out the other way. So I think it's a huge spot for Hunter just because, you watch their film, it's like they're all at the ball, but then there's no open passes at the same time. So it's one thing when you have a team like Rutgers that swarms to the ball and gives up open threes, or LSU. But this team, they do a good job of really taking it away, even though they provide all that extra pressure.
Yeah, try throwing the old cross-court pass off the opposite block over a lineup that's 6'8" across the board. It's not exactly as easy as some of these Big Ten matchups. And that kind of gets into, I know we're jumping back and forth between offense and defense.
Yeah, we'll just stick to the storylines. We don't need to go offense.
With Michigan trying to, operate in the half court against the way that Florida State defends, Michigan's ability to constantly move the ball quickly, make the extra pass from the extra pass is really, I think, what this is going to boil down to in terms of Michigan State. Jesus.
Struggling, man.
Michigan finding, I'm getting messages about Michigan State, if you can imagine. Their ability to make that extra pass from the extra pass, Dickinson's ability to make quick decisions with the ball, right? When the ball gets to him, you can't wait. You can't take that extra second and collect yourself. You gotta catch and pass. Like Michigan's ability to play out of ball screens or go like attack downhill in any way. Like I'm not seeing that happening. I think this is going to have to be ball movement until you get an open look. And then you got to hit threes when you get them, because they will find open looks if they move the ball the way we know they can. It's just as long as you are right, show some composure and know that the extra pass will lead to an open look. And Michigan, they can do that, right?
Yeah, and that is like a switchable team like this could always stagnate a team that just relies on the ball screen, I think. I think Hunter Dickinson changes that, and that's just what it all comes down to, right? If you can make those extra passes, and I think that's another reason we probably see a lot of that Eli Brooks, Shawnee Brown,
I agree,
Franz Wagner, Brandon Johns, Hunter Dickinson lineup. That's probably the one. The ball moves better with that lineup. The defensive matchups are more comfortable. I think based on how well that group played against LSU, I think you have to look at that even more in this spot. The one thing that's weird is, so Florida State they're ranked 272nd in 3-point volume allowed. So they allow a lot of threes. Yeah. But if you look a little closer at the stats, LSU, who's also way down there, they allowed 19 catch and shoot threes a game. Florida State only allows 15. So what that tells me is that they allow a lot more. Like a lot of teams shoot threes because they have to shoot threes, whereas
they can't get the ball anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas teams like LSU, you're shooting threes because they're literally giving you wide open threes. So that they're not maybe as vulnerable. You see the shot profile and you're like, oh, well, they're just going to bomb threes. But that tells me that it's more a product of how well their defense defends inside. And like you don't even have the length to shoot mid-range twos over them because they'll just block your shot. So a little bit of a weird kind of way that stat plays out. But the other thing to look at with their defense is they're terrible on the defensive glass. And that's because of how much they swarm to the ball, because of how aggressively they chase blocks. And again, Brandon Johns, there should be chances for him to crash the glass and get second chances and get involved. And that's really an area he's comfortable in. And that opportunity is here in this game.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite matchups might be the Eli Brooks, MJ Walker, right? Two senior guards, who've both played a ton of college basketball. MJ Walker's a 1,000-point career scorer. He averages like 12, 2, and 2. And Eli's Eli. Those two probably both going to play like 36 minutes, right? And be staring at each other in the face the entire game, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and they're both like nominal point guards in a way, right? They're not really point guards. They're not really the primary creator. And really what they do is they're one of the better shooters on each of their respective teams. So Walker is a guy who you have to play to the 3-point shot. He shoots 44%. But again, it's more of a catch and shoot 3-point shooter than off the dribble guy. So that's what the scouting report for Michigan at all these perimeter spots is going to come down to. Make them score over you instead of draw extra help and pass to someone who can just knock down a 3-point shot. And that being able to keep them out of the paint it's a tough challenge. Walker's bigger than Eli, but I don't know. I think that's a fine defensive matchup. They'll run him off screens. It's kind of like it's a good fit for what Eli does well defensively, even more so than like recent games where it was like Cam Thomas, who's just a bucket, right? Mm-hmm. I think this is a matchup he can handle to a degree.
I agree. Can we talk about Scotty Barnes?
Yeah.
Man. I like I looked at his KenPom comps. So his sophomore year, Victor Oladipo, sophomore year, Vincent Edwards. Kind of thought that was interesting. But, his passing is just unbelievable, man. I mean, his court vision, just the not only how kind of eager he is to pass, but the types of passes that he can make. He's a lottery pick. He's awesome.
Yeah, I had a stat in my first look. I think they score 1.5 points per play when he passes out of a ball screen, which is insanity. And it's not crazy volume, but that's just a ridiculous stat. Like someone's at 1.3 on those, they're really good. The really tough part about his game is, so you see he shoots 30% from three. He's not really an off the dribble jump shooter. So you think, okay, I'm going to play drop coverage. The problem is at 6'9", he can just flip the ball up to Bolsa on the backside, and you can't take that pass away.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for the big man because the big man's stuck guarding two there, right? Most people won't try to just flip it over a 7'2" guy like Hunter Dickinson, but they will, and they have the length at both spots. It's almost unguardable. And he also has this little kind of flip shot from the same place where he can just kind of push it into the rim. And it's not a super consistent shot. It's not really a jumper, but he can play really well out of that spot, kind of right inside the free throw line where he can either flip it in or flip it up to Balsa for a dunk.
People will see it. He's kind of got like that, like little yo-yo game. Like when he like came out of a ball screen, like he almost looks like he's going slower than the rest of the play. Like, cause he's kind of reading things and he can kind of he just has a really innate ability, it seems like, to kind of read what the defense is giving to him and not make a bad decision. He kind of doesn't get rushed. And then he just makes the right play out of it. And with his 3-point shooting, it's not like he's like jacking shots, right? Yeah, he's a 29% 3-point shooter, but it's not like what you saw in LSU where guys are just chucking shots from all over the place. He only takes, 2 a game, whatever. And I have a feeling they probably, if you go back and look at them, they're probably fairly open. He's not forcing a lot. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, he's only
like, you're not going to goad him into doing dumb stuff.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think if you're like, Michigan has as good of a matchup again here as you could have defensively. Franz Wagner can guard on the ball. He's long. He matches up perfectly. And Barnes can get into turnover problems. He had 5 turnovers against UNC Greensboro. Again, Franz Wagner, it's a perfect fit for Michigan to match up there. And no other team in the country really has a perfect fit to guard this guy. So that's it. That helps. He is scoutable in the sense that he's not going to beat you with threes. He's not really a big-time scorer. He kind of wants to just drift in and out of the game and facilitate and do that whole thing. I'd worry more. I think his length could cause Michigan a lot of issues defensively, just with his ability to pick up steals and stuff of that nature. So that's almost a bigger concern. I don't know. He's one of those guys. If you look kind of through his game logs, he can have a 4.1 assist game, and then he can have 21 points and 4 assists, right? So he's kind of all over the map consistency-wise, but obviously the ability is insane. He can just really turn it on in a hurry, and you don't really want to go against a guy like that in the Sweet 16 because he'll be the most talented player on the court. It's just how many minutes will he play, how well will he play, all that. I mean, if he makes a couple of threes, you're really kind of screwed. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Do you just flip that matchup on the other end? You expect him to be checking Franz?
I would think so, just the way it boils down. I mean, it's so hard because they're going to play
so many
9
bodies.
guys, right? So for Michigan, I think that actually presents an interesting dilemma where usually, like, you're scouting, your personnel, you pretty much know who you're going to guard most of the game, right? If you're Mike Smith, the 2 guys you could guard. If you're Shawnee Brown, it's 2 guys. you could guard 4 or 5 different players in this game for multiple possessions just based on the lineups that are out there. And a lot of the people on the back half of Florida State's rotation are fairly scoutable. Like there are guys who just shoot threes. There are guys who just drive and don't shoot threes. So that whole dynamic, it's got to be it's a tough prep, but that's important for Michigan, and they're pretty experienced to figure that out.
And you need to be on it. I was talking to someone yesterday who's kind of been looking at this and from a coaching perspective brought up a really interesting point that like you need to be on it in a game like this in terms of every stoppage of play, who's going in for Florida State, like what is the personnel change?
Exactly.
Because you can blink and suddenly you'll notice like, oh shit, there's a massive mismatch right there. And you just weren't on it. Right. So like that's crucial in terms of just, being constantly aware of place and personnel and, who's doing what, who has who, a lot of communication from the bench. It's really, really important stuff that probably goes easily overlooked, in terms of when the fire's going.
Yeah. The thing I can't really figure out about this team is, so they are the best team in the ACC. They didn't win it because they played fewer games, but they had the best efficiency margin stats. They're 13th on KenPom. It's hard to figure out just how bad or good the ACC was this year and what to really make of them as a team because of that. So that's where I keep coming back to like, okay, is this usually the best team in the ACC efficiency wise, you'd say they're really, really good, but you go through and look at, they haven't played a lot of great teams. They have some weird losses. I don't know what their best performances are, but again, is that a product of the schedule or is that a product of, I don't know. So that's kind of the wild card in this is we don't really know what to expect as far as the level of competition they faced. Yeah.
I mean, they lost to Notre Dame a little over 2 weeks ago. Notre Dame sucks. Like Notre Dame legitimately sucked this year. They lost twice to Georgia Tech. Now, was that just, Georgia Tech was sneaky pretty good, right?
Yeah, and
like
Georgia Tech, and it's just, you have to throw that out because they run a junk,
their matchup,
switching matchup zone bullshit. And
yep. But, I look at that UNC Greensboro game, like UNC Greensboro fell behind, came all the way back, got it to like a couple point game, fell behind in the second half, came back, right? Made it a couple point game. Like they didn't just go and hammer UNC Greensboro. And Colorado, is Colorado any good? I don't know.
Yeah. Colorado is good, I think. And UNC Greensboro is sort of like a mid-major Florida State where they play a way that you kind of just have to throw out because they really pressure the ball and force turnovers and stuff like that. I looked through they haven't played a team that's similar to Michigan that I can find, or like a team that's going to play through a post guy, play drop coverage, run good stuff offensively. I don't see a similar team really on there. Like, I want to look back at a game and say, oh, this is how they did against that team, but I don't really see it.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at what they did against Walker Kessler just to kind of see how they played kind of a true 5, but Kessler's not Dickinson.
The UNC's problem is they play 2 true 5s. They can't shoot a lick, and they're nothing like Michigan, right? They're like, so that you have to throw that game out too. So I don't know. That makes it hard to figure out. Because
and any team that loses by 25 to Wisconsin can be thrown out the window too.
That's fair too. So it's just a weird situation with those matchups as far as like they could be this amazing team that has just not had a chance to play great teams. They have the talent, obviously, or they could be a little overrated just because they haven't played great teams. So that's where I keep coming back to.
You wouldn't be surprised at all if they go out and, according to the numbers, this could very well be Florida State comes out, is turning the ball over all over the place. Michigan's scoring in transition. Michigan scoring on offensive rebounds, right? Michigan does have good matchups across the board that Florida State, typically tries to just outsize and out-depth their opponents. Well, does that really work against this version of Michigan? Not on paper, not particularly. So, if Michigan's big detriment could be if, something just unforeseen, right? They go 5 for 23 on threes, but we really haven't seen that happen like Michigan's going to make shots, I think. So I tend to agree with you that it's really hard to tell how good this Florida State team is. Now, I picked Florida State to win initially and have, over the last 36 hours, started to convince myself that Michigan's going to win. But, yeah, I mean, Florida State's going to have to play really, really well. Like, I think Michigan can play and win. I think Florida State has to play really, really, really well to win.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, and there's the three things. I think you just hit on a couple of these. Transition. Florida State is a huge transition offense. Michigan's been really good transition defense. That's a huge swing stat in really any game when you come up against when the teams are that spread apart, right? Where it's one of the best transition defenses against best transition offenses. So the same thing against LSU. You win that battle. That's huge for Michigan. Again, it's one of those things. You win it. Doesn't mean you're going to win the game, but it's hard to win the game without winning it. And then turnovers, like these are bad turnover numbers. 254th in turnover rate is really bad. And Michigan doesn't force many turnovers, but if you have 3 or 4 possessions that are live ball turnovers for layups, like that changes games. And we have seen Michigan change games with little runs like that. Because then they're 264th in offensive steal rate. So you can just live ball turnovers. Those are big. And then defensive rebounding. 296. Like those are, at this point in the season, you'd expect a team that's bad in some area to be ranked like 120th in one of those stats. To be down near 300 is a big red flag, I would say. And that's got to be, again, those aren't really issues where Michigan hasn't won games this year by offensive rebounding or forcing turnovers, but just on the margins, if you can pick up a few extra possessions there, that's huge. And that
doesn't mean they can't do it.
They can't do it in one game.
Dickinson and Johns can both offensive rebound and get some points. Franz and those guys can get, long offensive rebounds and things like that, right? You're not expecting Franz to go crashing the glass on the offensive end, but if they're missing threes, they do have guys that get long rebounds. Eli, right? Like they're going to get extra possessions between the turnovers and the offensive rebounds. And like the LSU game, right? Wasn't there a massive field goal differential in that game?
Yes, but didn't. It was more because LSU had more field goals, right? Because Michigan kept turning it over, and LSU didn't turn it over until Javonte Smart threw it out of bounds. Yeah, because the box street from the Michigan LSU game remains amazing, but. Yeah, no, I think it will be flipped in this case. I think it will be Michigan having, a shot volume advantage isn't that one of your expressions? You love like shot volume? I think that's John Gassaway's turf, but yeah.
I just got his book. I can't wait to start reading it.
I have it on my Kindle. Actually, it loaded on Marissa's Kindle, but I don't know how that happened. But
I got the hardcover just showed up in the mail, baby.
Oh, good off-season read to get into.
Yeah. What's it? Miracles on the Hardwood? It's about college basketball at small Catholic universities. I'm like, oh my God, did you? I wonder if I'm mentioned in the dedication. This is right up the alley. Holy shit! No pun intended. So, all right. What else you got here, man?
I mean, the other thing is like Leonard Hamilton. We can say how great his teams buy in. They haven't been able to get over the hump in a big postseason spot, I would say. Juwan Howard hasn't been in a big postseason spot, so that's kind of a wild card of this game. Obviously, they're also friends and know each other quite well, so that's an interesting kind of subplot of the whole game as well, I'd say.
Fun fact.
Howard
Eisley, as a young point guard at Boston College, played against Leonard Hamilton, coached Miami back in the old Big East days.
Good to know.
How about that?
And Leonard Hamilton coached Juwan Howard for the Wizards, right?
He did.
Small world.
That's right. What's the furthest he's gotten? Elite Eight, right?
Elite Eight against
once?
Michigan.
Just once?
I believe just once. Let me pull it up. Yes. Elite Eight against Michigan, Sweet 16 in 2019, Sweet 16 in 2011. I just wonder how the rotations play out for Michigan in this game. With Mike Smith struggling against size these last few games with Eli Brooks playing well, Shawnee Brown playing well. Just be really interesting how Michigan balances that, especially because like certain matchups, there are guys that don't really shoot on this Florida State team or aren't going to kill you. So maybe you can hide Mike Smith defensively, but it's just about how he fits in this sort of game where everyone's literally a half foot taller than him that'll be on the court.
Right.
That's a pretty big difference.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it earlier. That we saw what that lineup with Eli at the 1 did against LSU, and it just seems to make all the sense in the world here. That doesn't mean, Mike Smith is going to play 12 minutes, but I think you'll see more extended play from that other look than probably we've seen all year, I would guess. Eli show like his just ability to just comfortably just slide over and just do that is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it just changes Michigan's offense in a way that fits this kind of matchup, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think they're better at getting the ball in the post earlier. I think they're better at just moving it, and that really plays off. I think it's also a spot we're going to see 10, 15 minutes from Terrence Williams in this game. I think some of those minutes where Mike Smith's off the court will go to Terrence in a way because he fits defensively against a lot of these switchable players. And it seems like that's part of the plan at this point. And he had some good moments against LSU, also had some bad turnovers. Got to cut those turnovers out in a game of this stakes.
Do you have a pick here?
A pick. So I also picked Florida State in my bracket. I keep leaning toward Michigan the more I look at this game, just because of Florida State does so many things, but I'm not sure if there's like one unstoppable player or thing that changes the entire game. And that's honestly what Michigan's been most vulnerable against this year. They don't have that ball screen scorer. They don't have that individual guy to just unlock Michigan's defense that really does a good job of forcing one-on-one. And that's what I keep coming back to. From Michigan's point of view, I don't see the things we talked about are one-on-one scores and pick and pop bigs to give Hunter Dickinson problems. Dickinson's going to be able to camp out around the basket in this game on both ends of the court. And that's when Michigan's been at its best. So I think that actually works out pretty well.
As long as he doesn't get frustrated, though, man. Like, if he's showing any hesitation on these double teams and he starts getting frustrated, maybe he picks up a foul here or there, one of those, he wants to score and he tries to catch and turn and ends up kind of bowling some guys over and stuff like that. Like, it could go the other way. Yeah,
that's fair. Especially offensively. I could see him struggling offensively. And that's probably the biggest risk in this game for Michigan. But I still think I'm leaning toward picking Michigan at this point, especially with a week to prepare. It'd be a lot harder to prepare for all those doubles and stuff like that in 24 hours or 36 hours instead of having the whole week, being able to watch it, think about it, get better. And you have Juwan Howard telling you what to do is pretty good at that. That's an advantage for Michigan.
I tend to agree. I've gradually gone that way too, where liking Michigan more and more in this game. What do you have any, before we get out of here, you have any thoughts on that on the other side, Alabama, UCLA?
I did not expect to be talking about UCLA on our 5th NCAA tournament podcast. I'll tell you that much. Talk about a difference in shot profile. Like Alabama is all about threes and layups, and basically will just go balls to the wall in transition, even though they like a bad transition shot, not bad, but a forced transition layup or forced transition jumper more than a late mid-range too, right? So that's kind of their entire attitude, and it's dramatic. It's like a statistical outlier, but it is a big part of how they play.
Right.
UCLA is more going to slow things down. It's a big contrast in styles. Like Alabama plays fast. UCLA is going to make it a slugfest. It might give Alabama some problems just because it's so clunky and it's not really what we've seen in the SEC. But I also don't really trust anything about this UCLA team other than they have talent. They have guys who can make shots, and moments, but it's hard to keep up with Alabama's offense. And
yeah, I mean,
defense.
that's the thing. Like everything about the NCAA tournament is matchups. And it's just, do you get a really good matchup or can you get a really bad matchup? And I don't know which is going to be which in this instance, right? Like you can make a case that UCLA is a horrible matchup for Alabama. You can make a case that Alabama is a horrible matchup for UCLA. Both things are true, but who actually gets the edge? And in that case, you would probably usually go with talent, and Alabama has more talent.
Yeah, the one thing I'd say though, Alabama lost to Oklahoma in the Big 12 SEC Challenge, and Oklahoma is probably like as close as it gets to maybe a slow the pace down kind of man-to-man defense that you're going to see out of UCLA. So, like, that's the one game that Alabama lost 66-61 to Oklahoma. They lost 68-65 to Missouri. Those are like they don't win games in the 60s, and Mick Cronin can make a game play out in the 60s. Like that's what he does.
He'll get your ass into the 50s.
So that might bode well, but on the same token, Maryland plays slow as all hell, and Alabama ran up 96 points on them. So you got some issues there.
I agree. Yeah, I would probably just take Alabama just because on paper that's what makes the most sense. But I wouldn't be surprised if this thing blows up in Alabama's face either.
They feel very volatile, right? Like,
yes.
They're going to lose a game where they go 2 of 37 from 3-point range and all of a sudden it's over. Like that's coming.
I feel like Alabama would rather play Michigan than UCLA, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because it'd be in the Elite Eight.
No, you know what I mean? Like it's just in terms of like, it's just a more like natural way of playing that they can kind of do their thing. Whereas UCLA, like you do run the risk of being so taken out of your element that it just goes sideways, which is how you lose a 2-10 game or whatever this is, right?
11, right? 2-11.
11, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting an 11 seed, I think you'd rather not see a bunch of guys who used to be top 50 recruits, right? Like that's the thing. They're not. You'd rather see. It's not like they're playing Abilene Christian like UCLA played in the last round. Like UCLA isn't going to walk on the court and be scared of these guys, and that helps. I think that brings it a little closer than maybe you'd expect when you just look at the seeding. But I would still pick Alabama to win that game.
All right. You got anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think that wrap it up.
That does it.
Game is what?
When the hell is this game?
5?
Sunday something?
Sunday at 5 on CBS.
So we will record either late that evening or early the following morning. We'll see how it goes.
Probably. Well, yeah, we'll figure it out.
I'd be more inclined to do the evening, I would imagine. Might have to go to the chiropractor in the morning again. I'm struggling over here, man. All right. Well, that will do it for this episode of The Moving Screen. Be sure to leave us a review in the iTunes store. We are we thank everyone who has done so far. I saw you share a nice tweet there, Dylan.
Getting the publicity out there, man.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good call. Good marketing for our free podcast.
What we're doing over here.
So thank you everyone for listening, and we do appreciate the support. Subscribe to The Athletic, subscribe to UM Hoops, and be sure to tip your bartenders and servers.